Come on. There we go. All right, welcome to the April 3rd Cloud Event Serverless Working Group call. Before we jump right into it, John, do you need to leave early?
Sorry, was trying to find the right window to unmute. Yes, if at all possible.
Okay, should we jump right down to Ben's PR right now? Because you had some feedback on that. I'd like to get that discussion going
Yes,
before you vanish.
and I haven't had time to read the feedback on my feedback yet. But
Okay, so Ben, tell you what, why don't we quickly jump into your stuff and then we'll backtrack around to all the other agenda items.
okay.
So why don't you update us on the current status of things, and then we could talk about those thoughts.
Yeah. Just doing all the grammar updates as well as like correcting some of the wording as well. So thank you, Doug, for all the feedback and comments. So in the process of getting that, I'll have that done later probably sometime after this meeting. And I've been entering some of the questions as well. So I'll start with John because that one seems more time relevant at the point. So thank you, John, for the question and some of the feedback. So I did give a gist of the response back. I've been spending a lot of time on a lot of these questions, just like making sure like I cover all my assumptions as well as like just thinking about most of the things. But I want to make sure that we are not also introducing more complexity into this specific proposal. This is just kind of give the format and the outline of like basically how to pass signatures, hence the two new attributes. As opposed to you said John, specifically, you said that something was feeling off, and I really want to highlight that because I think it's really important. Like I know when I'm like reading code reviews and other proposals, like I can't usually put my finger on something, but I'm like something just doesn't feel right. Um, and a lot of the times it turns out that is correct. Like if it gets merged or something happens, right? Like months later, it turns out that something was definitely wrong. But there have been cases where, I've been wrong on those feelings, right? So, but it's really what I wanted to highlight. It's really hard to argue those feelings. So I
I
tried to like,
completely, yeah.
yeah, I tried to address it as your concerns as open as possible, without trying to like, rabbit hole into any sort of implementation. So I tried to do it at a very high level. So let me know if that works for you. And like, for example, like for the multi-hop ones, I talked about, like you would need to then re-sign, or, additive changes would not break verification. So those things are okay. But like if you're changing from for like the example that you gave from like the structured format to binary or vice versa, then yeah, you would need to re-sign at that point. Um, but
And if
also,
you resign, let me just
yes,
pull it up. Does that So that would then resign as the intermediary?
yep.
Does- Uh, is there anything within? Right, so sorry, waiting for GitHub. Um, so we've got the verification material and the verification material type.
Correct.
Um, is the intention that the verification material is some sort of private key that can be okay? Consumers would use the producer's public key to verify the signature, but it wouldn't. If a producer signs their event and then an intermediary needs to do a transformation, so it can re-sign,
Mhm.
and the consumer can end up saying, "Okay, well, this is valid against the material that I was given." Uh, how do they know whose material it is? Can they? Is there some way that they can see that the intermediary
The trail.
re-signed, and
Yeah.
yeah, exactly, and that the original producer had signed it? So can they like end-to-end validation, whatever?
Yeah.
Uh, and can they tell the difference between something that was signed by an intermediary and something that was signed by uh, the original producer? Like, if I'm doing a man in the middle attack, I will happily sign it, and
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you'll just
exactly.
accept it,
Yeah.
because that you need to know that you can trust me, who's presenting the validation material.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. So yeah, let me kind of start with the first question there. Of signing it and getting that trail, right? So that is more towards the implementation. Um and for some companies that might be very, very important, like banks, for example. That's like number one. They would really care about that. Government facilities would really care about, or institutions would really care about that. So these are very important use cases, right? And so I want to highlight that in order for you to have like this trail, right? I don't know if it makes sense for this set of proposals, but it is possible. And the way that we are planning on solving this at Apple, at least. So like I said, I'm part of CD events, and kind of give you a little bit of context of like what CD events is. It's basically to make interoperability between tools in this SDLC lifecycle. So like CI systems would send the same events, and then you could swap out a different CI, and it would always send the same events, and the CD systems would consume those events. And so any events that are being consumed would always have the same outputs and same inputs, et cetera, et cetera. So that's kind of the gist of things. However, we needed some sort of verifiability here, mostly for like security auditing, et cetera. And one thing that is a a system that needs to live inside of CD events is called this link service, which kind of links all these events together. And that's how we plan to keep this audit trail. I don't imagine other companies need to go this crazy and this nuts, like needing a separate service to do this. But the wanting of a auditing or a trail like system is up to the implementer. So I'll give you an example. So like DSSE can completely have that audit trail. So DSE is very, very flexible and allows you to have any sort of like additional like attributes inside of its, because it's just an envelope for the signatures, and you could just pass in all the signatures if you want. So it's completely up to the implementation. But however, the reason why I want to say implementation, because if you use something like JWT, you will need some sort of like other way of like getting the previous signatures, right? So that's why I say it's more for the implementation. But for something like DSSE, that's completely possible, and that's why we chose that algorithm. That's going to be the next proposal, which I think these questions are going to be very relevant at that point. Like for this particular proposal, at the early stages, it is really important, but I feel like we're asking it a little too early, because DSSE is going to answer a lot of these questions. And to give you good example of this, the signatures is an array. So you could stuff all of them, if you care about it, all of them in there in order, for example, and sign it. So that is how that could be particularly answered or solved. But like I said, for this particular proposal, we wanted to keep that out, just because we wanted implementations to be separate, and just provide this first two attributes as a starting point, if that makes sense, John.
I think so. And I think I'm seeing with things like being able to specify which attributes it covers and which it doesn't, that being a cloud specific context, sorry, cloud event specific context. Um, Certainly with structured payloads, I can see how that wouldn't work in a transport specific payload neutral way, because when the attributes are part of the payload, you need to be able to work out which ones you're pulling out. Um,
Yes.
yeah, I that definitely helps me feel more comfortable.
Okay,
Um,
great, great.
I'm I'm still not looking forward to implementing this in the cloud the Java
Yes.
SDK. Um,
And I'm gonna do my best efforts to get because unfortunately, like as being part of Apple, like I hate to say it, but we're not open source friendly. I mean, we've been much better these last few years, and I've been like pounding my head to get like we just got approval for this for the CDF, which is an org that houses like Argo CD, for example. And so we're allowed to make contributions there for to give you a highlight. So I'm going to try my best to also include your guys' org so we can make contributions to the SDK, and we would be happy if we're able to do the work for you if it makes sense, right? So like I said, if the lawyers give us the okay, then we'll go ahead and do that, because we have a lot of security engineers like that they wanted to get their hands on the implementation side of things. So like I'm like yeah, let me work out the details. But yeah, so worst case, yeah, John, you're right. You'll have to implement it, but like I said, give me a few months, because unfortunately these answers are never like I ask it and it's an immediate yes or no.
Aside from anything else, I'm not going to be able to. I wouldn't be able to find the time to do it. Probably any time in 2025 anyway. So yeah,
Okay, yeah.
take your time finding someone.
Okay,
if you
awesome.
can, that's awesome.
Okay, yeah, but I'm letting you know that that's in the works of getting the okay to submit code changes to the code additions, features, etc. For the SDKs.
Yeah, I think that puts my mind sufficiently at rest. I would be interested. Has Clemens reviewed this yet, Doug?
I don't believe so. But before I forget, whatever you just said to John, is there a way to add text to the specs so that it's in there so the next John that comes along gets the same answer without having to ping you?
Yes, yes.
There's quite a lot in the PR response that covers similar bits. So maybe putting some of that in background and motivation would be useful.
Yeah. I think that makes sense. Yeah, I just wasn't sure, like, because like it's a lot. I don't know how much context to give. Like, I don't want to talk about like CD events, et cetera, et cetera. But I think I can word it in such a way that it should be able to put, like you had said, Doug, the next John that comes in and reads that, put their minds at ease. But I'll try my best to fit that, and see what I can do to make that work.
Fortunately, there aren't very many people like me.
Okay, well, that's good. Yeah. Well, in that case, yeah, I'll definitely send you a ping once I get that section updated, and then if it works for you, John, then I can then go ahead and resolve that GitHub comment.
Yeah, I think getting Clemens to look at this as well. Partly, I was sort of channeling Clemens when saying, "Hey, we don't do auth stuff, and we deliberately don't get involved in auth because it has these challenges, and we're going to do it worse than at other things." I can imagine him having probably more specific concerns than I do, because he tends to be good like that. So if we could get Clemens to give a sign off, that would make me much more comfortable.
Yeah, agreed. So hold on a sec. Trying to juggle people's schedules here. So let's quickly pause this discussion because I do want to return to it. However, Manuel, quickly, can you update us on how KubeCon went? Because you need to leave. Yes.
Yeah, exactly. I'm at KubeCon right now. We had quite a late slot yesterday that was in conquering what the with the free beer that we had. So there was like 50 people showing up. There were over 150 that signed up on the scheduling app, but it went good. There were a few questions. Still quite a few people that have not used cloud events or heard from it for the very first time. But overall, I'd say it was quite good. Again, thank you for everyone who approved us to preemptively approve the PR and make RC1 happen. Also, thank you for everyone that made RC1 happen, especially Doug, Clemens, Lila, Klaus, and Simon. So we could announce that because I actually got a few people coming up to the stage after the talk saying they will check that out. And I hope there will be some issues and some reviews.
Excellent. I'm glad people had questions afterwards. That's a good sign. Cool.
Yeah, that's always a good thing. People not being on their phone and questions after the talk. That's the two KPIs.
Yes. All right. Does anybody have any questions for Manuel before he has to vanish? All right, cool. In that case, again, thank you, Manuel, for doing this. I know you put a lot of work into it. If you could let me know where the final version of your slides are, then I can upload them to our shared folder. That way people have it for future reference.
Yes, yes, I will.
Cool. All right, cool. Thank you. And last chance, yeah, last chance before Manuel vanishes. Anybody have any questions, comments? All right, cool. All right. Thanks again, Manuel.
Thank you. Bye.
And have safe travels back.
Thank you.
Yep. All right, let's return to John's PR. So, I'm
Ben's
sorry, not
PR,
John's
not
PR,
mine.
Ben's PR. Yeah, Ben's PR, sorry. John, I know you said you want Clemens to review it, which I think everybody would agree. He has a very strong opinion in this space. But is there anything else from your side, John, that you want to bring up?
Only I can see a typo right now of verification material type.
Where's
Down
that?
the second thing. Yeah,
What line number?
line 54 where you are, the bit in brackets. I hadn't spotted before. Verification. There's a
Oh,
missing
yeah.
I. But other than that,
yeah. Cool. Thank you. Fixing
it's
that
amazing
right
what
now.
you see freshly when it happens to be shared. No, I'm at the stage where if Clemens is happy, then I'm happy. So I'm definitely not a -1 on this, if that's useful.
All right, cool. In that case, Eric, is there anything you'd like to bring up? Because you had a comment as well.
No, but thanks.
Okay. Does anybody else have any comment? Okay, not hearing, seeing anybody come off mute. Ben, I got a question for you. Aside from all the nitpicky little things I put in there, I'm curious. It seems like how do I say this right? It seems like there was quite a bit of discussion around things like having a trail of this stuff, right? Or having multiple layers of verification, because you might have intermediaries that need to add stuff and then re-verify, but they don't want to remove the original verification, stuff like that. And you use the terms trail and stuff and things like that. But then you also talk about how you want to keep it simple, which is obviously a great goal. However, would it make sense to change this proposal such that you allow for what you call it nested or multiple, I don't know, but multiple verifications to be active at the same time with some sort of possibly ordering or nesting to it? That way, we don't have to worry about an additional spec coming later to support that probably popular use case that would either break this one or negate the need for this one, and people will just jump to that one to begin with. As long as we make sure that the simple case of only one layer is still really, really simple. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, I think so, but like I said, I think that rests on the implementation for the most part. Like I said, some of the implementations like this wouldn't work, right? I'll give you an example. Actually no, it'd still work for any implementation. Because the material, the verification material is whatever you whatever you provide in the or however you specify in the implementation, right? So in the implementation, it might not be just the signature that's in the verification material, right? It might be like an envelope of something, right? For JWT, for example, or it might be an array, right? So you can specify that, and whenever the type is, let's say JWT, it has to follow that implementation's proposal guidelines to verify, right? So if it's a list of JWT tokens, it would have to go ahead and do that. However they decide to do the trail verification, right? So I think it still works, and but what we can do is specifically call that out if you guys are okay with that approach. Because we can say that this is a common use case, and maybe that's a good idea, is have a use case section and saying for, audit trails or, multi-hop, this is an implementation detail, and this would rely on, and to give an example, like a hard example with like JWT, like this is how this could be solved, for example. Like, would that work?
So I agree with you that this proposal, as it currently stands, has that flexibility, because you're right. You could put whatever you want in this string, basically. I agree with that. However, what you're then forcing is every single verification material type to define its own mechanism for how to do chaining or yeah, chaining, whatever the term
Yes,
is,
but
right?
it might need to work that way because every chain or every verification material or type is very different, right? Like JWT is not even close to DSSE, right? Like DSSE supports this like out of the box, right? So like it would be weird to include it
Well,
in.
let me finish my thought, because
Okay.
what I was wondering was whether you could still keep it really, really simple
Mhm.
by doing something like put these together into one object, shall we say,
Okay.
okay? And then have an array of those objects, an ordered array, right? Something as simple as that. That way, when you want to verify this, you always start with either the first or the last one. We decide the order, and you
But then
just
that would need to be signed, right?
um I don't know, maybe. I'm not so sure. That's something we need to discuss. But it seems to me that rather than defining, here's how you define a nesting structure, if we just make it part of your original proposal, say, here's the nesting structure, it's as simple as an array or something like that, right? Then you don't need to redefine that for every single verification type, because what's
Can anyone else hear anything? Doug, sorry.
No.
I think we
Yeah,
lost him.
I thought it was me, my end.
No,
So,
well,
yeah.
that's why I thought I would check. I quickly checked in another tab that no, I do still have internet connection.
Yeah, same. So I think we lost Doug. Um, but I see what he's saying. I just okay. Let me ponder it though, because I'm still on the fence with it. Because I feel like that. Because I feel like you would still need to sign the ordering because someone could just put something in the middle and just like willy-nilly. So yeah. So I think you still get into the same, well, it's a different problem, but definitely still in the same ballpark. But yeah, I'll wait for Doug, but I definitely have some questions on that. So it definitely makes the signing process a little bit more complicated as well. So
That's
okay.
interest. How big do these get? I'm just thinking about
Yeah, size. Yeah,
yeah, I can't remember what size limitations we have for
64
actually
kilobytes.
right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, because I was well aware and really concerned about this. So yeah, people need to be aware that, adding verification material and you start adding an array and a list, things get large very, very fast, right? So, especially if they choose something like SHA, 512, right? Something ridiculous. Then
And that 64K is for, just looking at the spec, that's for the full event. That's not on
full
a per
event.
attribute basis.
Yeah, full
So
event.
if you've already got a payload that is 50K, you haven't got as much to play with.
Exactly. And that's why I try to keep this as small as possible, is because for that reason. Because when we were looking at DSSE, we made a POC, and we hit that limit because originally we were signing everything individually, and we realized, when you do that, you get all these. Basically, you get all these signatures, and it expands it, ridiculously large. So yes, that is a very valid concern, and one of the main reasons why we decided on just keeping it simple and the single one.
Welcome back, Doug.
I apologize. My power flickered, and so everything went out, not just my computer, but my Wi-Fi, and had to wait for everything to reboot.
No worries, no worries.
Yeah.
But yeah, I got the gist of what you were saying, Doug, and yeah, I was also like, did my power go or did my Wi-Fi drop? But yeah, I think everyone was in silence for a good 20 seconds before John interjected. Um, but yeah, what I think is important. I think John hit the nail like right on the head, and this is something that we tested internally as well. Is you have to be very careful about verify signature size, because once you start adding an array, things get fat really, really fast. Definitely depending on the implementation. for example, right, if you start adding like RSA, or not RSA, it could be any sort of signature, right? It could be like JWT, or it could be like, even if you have like some private public key type scenario, right? Those can get very large, especially like if you start allowing for an array. And even for DSSE, that's why we opted internally not to use the array. We'd only use a one signature array, is because we cannot, things get really big in the SDLC lifecycle. So we couldn't use that array. We couldn't have that same audit trail in the same manner, because we're hitting that 64 kilobyte limit. So especially because our events are not the smallest as well. So I just want to call that out. Like, I'm not saying that, we had 64 kilobytes worth of signatures, but that is a valid concern, right? So
But isn't that a not an implementation concern, but a deployment concern, right? Because you're living in an environment that's constrained in terms of the size. And in that case, it's, well, then don't do multiple signing, right? But if you're living in an environment where you don't have those size constraints and you actually can support 3 layers of signatures, why would we not define a mechanism to do that?
Well, I mean, right, but like, it depends like what the flow is. If you're only ever talking to 3 things, then sure. But is that the common use case? Like, I don't know if it is, right? Because like generally, I mean, at least for us, it isn't. Like, we talked to at least like 50 things, and that's why our signatures were getting very large. And I understand that that's not also the common use case, but I feel like it's probably somewhere in the middle, right? I think 3 is probably too small. And to give you an example of this, right? I think we signed 6 separate attributes independently, and that was already 2 kilobytes, right? So that gets large really, really fast. Like, signatures are not small. So that's why it's really important to call it out.
But I'm confused. Are you saying you need to do 50 signatures, or you just need to hit 50 endpoints?
Well, if there's no, if there's 50 intermediate, so unfortunately, like Apple, we have like so many proxies. So that's what I mean. We have like basically when we go, so we talk to AWS, we hit 2 internal proxies, then we hit an AWS proxy. But so yes, we hit like, yeah, basically 50 different things. So yeah.
Right. Okay. But that doesn't necessarily mean that all 50 are going to necessarily need to sign anything, right? How many actually are going to want to sign something? Because you said you had a whole bunch of different attributes, but do you really sign every single attribute independently, or do you kind of sign them as a group?
Yeah. No. We signed it as a group, right? But yeah, but if if things aren't changing it, then you're absolutely right. Only like maybe I think only 2 or 3 things actually changed the actual like payload. So those things would need to sign it. So maybe it is just a handful. But so
Yeah,
yeah,
that's what I'd like to explore, right?
yeah,
Because
yeah.
to me, if you set it up such that you handle the singular case, dirt easy, and everybody understands it, and there's no confusion there, but it's extensible so that you can add more. Then it just becomes a factor of, okay, will your environment support X number of signatures before you hit some limit? And if you do,
Right.
well, then don't do it that much, right? But at least we
Yeah.
give you the option.
But we still need to sign the array though. And the reason why is because someone in the man in the middle could literally just put something in the middle, right? And say, hey, I was valid at this point, and then mosey on through, right? So I think we still need to sign that array, which that's small, but that does complicate things a little bit. But if we feel like that's a necessity to get it, to be able to support, like a trail, then I don't mind making the change. I think it's completely fair. It's just that I'm like, okay, but we could handle it in the implementations, and implementations already might support it, and that's why I'm leaning more towards that. But if like I said, that's just my take on it. But if people are more in favor of supporting it on in this proposal, then I'm okay doing that as well.
So does anybody else have any opinion on this? Because I'm definitely not an expert in this space. It was just based upon the feedback I saw. That's one of the things that popped in my mind. So John, since you're off mute, let me ask you, do you think it would be worthwhile to support out of the box this idea of a chain?
I am not enough of a uh, I don't have enough knowledge in this space. It seems useful, but I'd be okay with that being an implement. Like we talk about implementation specific, but it feels like that's mostly uh, what format of verification material is being used.
Yes.
Right. And within that, I can easily imagine like containers of stuff so that you can have a chain where the container doesn't specify anything other than here's how you delimit multiple other verification materials
Hmm.
potentially. Like just how in the same way that we have video codecs that aren't really codecs, but they're just containers for other codecs. Um, it I can imagine situations. No, I'm going to shut up because I'm completely speculating. I was going to speculate that do we want to support one person wanting to attach one kind of signature and then a chain where the next intermediary or whatever wants to attach a different kind of signature? And I've no idea how realistic that is.
I mean, it is a potential though, and again, like if we do add it to this proposal, we do need to also add like signing that on top of it as
Yep.
well, because like I said, like someone can just interject anything in the middle of it, or even delete things, right? Which would be even worse. So, um, so yeah, so it's like it would have to add like the same attributes again, basically. These two, like again,
Yeah.
like yeah. So that's why I'm a little bit like, I mean, it's fine, but you know, it does require that extra step as well.
Okay. Well, think about it, and in particular, talk to yourself, talk to your security experts that you work with, and see what they think, whether it be worthwhile. Because my biggest fear is we approve this, and granted, it's an extension, and extensions can change at any time. But if we think the minute this thing gets approved, someone's going to come along and pretty quickly ask for multiple. I'd rather get it out of the way now, is my
Yeah,
only
yeah. I
point.
mean, breaking changes are never a good thing. So, you know,
Yeah.
to try to get a breaking change mitigated now, I think makes a lot of sense. Um, but yeah, let me talk to the security folks, because I mean, it's definitely it's definitely a valid concern, whether or not we should bring it up here rather than the implementation. Um, and and think about it,
Okay.
in that regard.
That's
But
fine.
yeah.
Okay. Think about it. Um, okay. I don't think it's ready yet to merge today, especially
Mm-mm.
since there are any comments. General consensus, we want Clemens's eye to look over this thing, and I will nag him. Are there other things from other people or from Ben that you'd like to bring up to bring to people's attention, or questions for Ben?
Oh yeah, so there was one comment that you had, Doug, about like detached, like, and not understanding it. So I spent like a month in security meetings to understand detach and attach concepts, like this attach and detach concept. And the main reason is even among security, even in like if you go to the internet and looked up what detached signatures versus attached signatures is, there's always like a subtle differences. There's like no agreed definition of it. So that's problem number one. So we probably should define it actually, like as if we're going to use it in this spec. But the general notion of it is an attached signature just means that it's being sent with the original payload. And a good example of this would be like structured mode. Like it would just always be in the whole envelope. It would be part of the envelope. Detach, a good example of this is headers, because you send headers first, then you send the payload. That makes it detached. So that's a good like hand wavy explanation of it. But like I said, there's always like someone that gives a little bit more limitations. Some are a little bit more open to the semantics of it. But I just wanted to call that out though.
Okay, that helps. Thank you. Eric, you came off mute for a second. Did you want to chime in?
I did, and I apologize if this becomes a little bit of a rant. It's in the name that these are cloud events, and I think that particularly that means that the key users are the cloud users, and I'm going to tie that back to the notion of trusted intermediaries, or what's been implied about the ability for private keys to be passed to intermediaries. And I just want to note that as a user, the idea of turning over private keys seems like a security hole. And the idea of trusting intermediaries seems like a security hole. So I can appreciate that for the big houses, the cloud providers, that they may trust their infrastructure and their intermediaries that they are in control of. As the end user, we're not in control of those, and it is a failure of ours if we do trust them. So I hope that can be considered while you're kind of navigating how to design this. Thanks.
Sure. I think for that particular like trusting intermediaries, like, I mean, unfortunately, that's a very sensitive topic in security. Man-in-middle attacks is a good example of this. But that's also the case for like transport level authentication as well, and what have you. So I mean, it's unfortunate that that's just you know how the systems work. You have to have some sort of intermediary, when you're sending things a lot of the time. And I definitely thought about it, and I will see what I can do to design it, or I guess word it in such a way that that works well. But I don't know if we can get over the fact, because if something is touching the payload or doing something to something, you want to know that, and if that intermediary is saying, hey, I signed this, I did this, and I'm going to send it off, the thing that's consuming it says, hey, this is the thing that signed it, it's using this signature, right? It should be able to go get like the public key or what have you, to then note who that user or that intermediary is. And if you do not, then that would probably be the concern there, or be the the red flag in something malicious that happened. And if someone actually got into the system, then at that point, like, if someone got into the system, you're already pretty much in a world of hurt. So I don't know what else I can add, but I will definitely think about it, if that makes sense, Eric.
Of course, I was just asking for some consideration.
Okay. Yeah.
Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
You're doing the work, I think. Thank you for that.
Cool. All right. Any other questions for Ben? All right. And just a reminder, if you have not had a chance to read it yet, please do. We need as many eyes as possible on this, because this is a very touchy subject. All right, Ben, anything else before we move on to the next topic?
Just a really quick one. So I know Clemens has been mentioned a lot. So do we know, is he a pretty busy person? Like, I guess what I'm asking is, like, would I expect a review like the end of this year, or is it more of like, like in the next like month? Like, I'm just trying to like time box this.
I'm pushing to get him to review it, like, if not tomorrow, next week.
Okay, awesome. Thank you.
Yes. Okay. And yes, he is busy, but we talk on a regular basis, so I can nag him appropriately.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right, cool. Well, thank you for all that, Ben. All right, so back up to the normal agenda item. Okay, we're talking about KubeCon. We did release, as Manuel said, X Registry version 1 release candidate 1. The link to the release is here. Thanks to everybody, and congratulations to everybody who had a hand in making that happen. Now we did approve, last week's call, we did approve Lila's PR preemptively. So thank you all for that. However, we found there were, during our last minute flurry of reviews in preparation for getting this out in time for KubeCon this week, we did have a whole bunch of other PRs. I don't think any of them are really that significant, but I did want to put the list of the bigger ones here. So in case you guys are interested, you can review them. If you think something was done incorrectly, please speak up and we can revisit it. The only ones I did not include here were things that were really, really minor typo kind of things. I didn't think you guys cared much about that. The ones that were most interesting to us were things like the Open API template and stuff like that, if you're interested. But otherwise, here's the list if you're interested. All right, so with that, we are, I should say, X-Registry is going to move on to RC2, which I believe is scheduled for a 2-month time frame. So we'll see how that goes. Now, that's technically the end of the official agenda. However, I realized last night that we still have about 43 different cloud event issues open up. I'd like to take the time on any of these phone calls, if we have extra time, to go through some of the issues and start doing things with them. And I figure we either need to close them, tag them as version 2. If we think we don't want to necessarily close it yet, tag it as need some kind of volunteer to push it. And that means it will still be a nagging reminder for us, but eventually we may close it or get somebody to volunteer. But it basically says, not quite sure what to do with it yet, looking for volunteer. Or if you just say, not yet, let's stay it for another week or two, we just want to ponder it. I fear those are probably the 4 possible responses for any of these. Okay.
Doug, you could also say should be an extension.
Sure. At that point, they still may need to be a volunteer to make it happen, though.
Okay, all right.
Yes. All right. So this one, I think, Ben, you said your proposal should probably cover this one, right?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So let's assume that will be covered by Ben's. Do me a favor though, put the fixes taggy thingy in your first
Oh, I
comment.
did. Yeah, I did that already. So yeah, it's already
Perfect.
there.
Thank you. All right. Spec conformance tool. I know that a lot of people said, hey, great idea. And I'm going to pick on John because you specifically said, I think most recently at the bottom of this list, you thought it was a great idea to have and you didn't want to close the issue. However, the last comment on here was back in 2022. And John, your comment was 21.
And since then, so this being a service validator, it feels to me like if we were going to do more validation work, then if you remember, and I forgive anyone who doesn't remember this, in the Cloud Events conformance test repo, I have a branch that includes a bunch of stuff for, I think, XML and JSON. I may not have put the XML in there. Let's see whether it's in a branch or it's possibly in a fork. If you just go into the branches and let's see, all format tests. That's it. So if you look at the commits in there, this was an expectation, a hope that we could have some format tests that all SDKs would adhere to check that we're all parsing things the same, etc. That feels like a lower hanging fruit than the service validation conformance. And yet we still haven't got round to it, and it's been a year and a half since I did anything on it, clearly. So this feels like something that, yeah, I like the idea of it, but I don't think it's going to happen. So I would be okay with closing it. Maybe close it, but say we're closing because we don't expect this to happen. But if any volunteer does come and wants to do a load of stuff, then we would welcome it.
Okay. Does anybody have an alternate opinion on what to do with this one? And keep in mind, a valid choice is to say you want another week to ponder it. Okay. Any objection to closing with a comment that says willing to reopen if somebody volunteers? Okay. Cool. Let's take a look at this one. I'll let you guys read this one. Anybody have any thoughts on this one?
I strongly suspect that this will be strict means whatever I want it to mean, but I'm not willing to define it clearly. And if it's not that, then my guess is that people will suggest that non-strict is less strict than I would want it to ever be. Like, surely we should just always parse strictly.
Yeah. What's interesting about this to me is I'm not sure we really get into validation of data directly in the spec.
Does it say later on what is being validated in a strict one that
This one.
by default disabled for more speed? No, no, no. Correctness is the most important thing.
It just feels to me that this is more of a application level concern than a spec concern.
Yeah, this is
Yeah.
totally application level. I'm trying to read the comments here, but yeah, my intuition is saying application.
Or at least SDK. So I can see potentially being able to say, please parse this cloud event strictly, or please parse this cloud event leniently. But having that as an extension on the cloud event itself, it's a bit like the evil bit, RFC.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm hearing close this. Not enough interest in it at this time.
Close with fire. No, I would say it's not just that there's, from my perspective, it's not that there's not enough interest, but I would actively reject doing it. I think the spec would be worse for it being present.
Okay, I was trying to find a nice way to phrase that. Okay.
Yeah. This is just on the call, which is of course being recorded.
Yes, of course. I'll find a nice way to word that. I won't even put that in the notes. I'll just find a nice way to word it. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Partition key. Oh, Ron Clemens. So
Is partition key still
whoops.
we had one extension that went away, but maybe it wasn't partition key.
Partitioning.
We do have partitioning still.
There you go, partition key. So does anybody have time or desire to volunteer to write a sample? It's not even doing a full-blown spec, it's just writing a sample. Actually, doesn't the extension itself have a sample? Hold on.
It doesn't, but I wonder whether some original, I would expect that the original PR might have something in conversations.
6 years ago, holy crap. We've been around a long time. Boom. James Roper, wow, I haven't heard of him in ages. Does he have an example?
There's certainly a lot of discussion on PR 218.
Yes, that's a low number too. It's fascinating. All this text and no sample. It must be obvious.
Well, there's 80 hidden ones too, so it might have been in the 80 other ones.
I don't know. I feel like partition key is pretty well defined by this whatever messaging system you're using that has the key, like Kafka.
Oh, C209. So,
Wait, what is 209?
so 209 seems to have something like a partition key.
Is there an example in here?
This looks like it's more about almost the source than I'm wondering if event key and source are similar enough that it could work for you. Event key doesn't exist anymore, of course.
Well, regardless, does anybody want to volunteer to add an example?
I'm assuming this is supported in the SDKs, right? I could just like literally just like start up an SDK and then get the wire and then submit that as an example. If that's all I need to do, I don't mind doing it.
I mean, honestly, it could be as simple as just go to a Kafka example and take partition key out of one of those things and slap it in the partition key extension. I mean, it could literally be that simple.
Okay, yeah, let me, I'm not signing up for it, but let me do a little bit of research on the Kafka example first. And then if I can't find it there, then I will look at the SDK to see if I can generate it and just use like a Kafka backend just to make sure it works.
I would expect any SDK to just allow it to be set and allow it to be queried without any extra information being particularly. I'm pretty sure in the .NET SDK, if we have anything, it's just, hey, what do you want the partition key to be?
Yeah. Okay, well, thank you, Ben, for volunteering to take a look at that. It is much appreciated.
Yep, no problem.
Okay, this one. SDK should bubble up non-CE data to like extensions.
I'm amused that my initial reaction was, in what way are extensions not CE data? And I said exactly that in July 2021.
Yeah, it seems to me this is okay. I don't think this was my issue originally. I think someone mentioned on a call, and I didn't want to lose it in case someone wanted to follow through. I think this may have just been if there's non-CE headers, as an example, should they be bubbled up to the application? And I'm now thinking that that's really just an implementation choice of who's ever processing the message.
If you want stuff that's transport specific, that's not part of the cloud event, then you should be intercepting things earlier. It's like no HTTP client says, here was the raw packets that were part of this HTTP response, which is sort of what this is like. This is one level down from that or up from that. But no, you want the cloud event abstraction, you get the cloud event. You don't get the other stuff that happens to be come along with it.
Right.
Can people hook into the SDKs in such a way that allows them to easily bubble this up? Is that an idea?
I don't know. I think in the Golang SDK, I think you can get to the HTTP object if you're using the HTTP object created by the Cloud Event SDK. I think.
Yeah, in the .NET SDK, it's not that you hook into anything. You say, here is an HTTP response, please parse it as a cloud event, or here is a cloud event, please create an HTTP request from it, and you can do whatever you want. It's not like the SDK provides a web server that only gives you a source of cloud events.
Gotcha. Okay, I was just trying to understand the ask here, but okay, yeah. I mean, it's yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna close this one and say, hey, this is outside of scope for us, possibly application level details or extra other tooling kind of stuff, something like that. Does that sound fine to you guys?
Yep.
Okay. Okay. Klaus, you're still on the call.
Yep.
Now you said Leon Clemens, which I agree with because he lives in that space. Do we without Clemens here though, is it worth us pursuing this, given that we haven't done so in what years?
Is the plus JSON part actually relevant? Are we actually just wanting to register application/cloud events and we get plus format for free? Or
That might be.
register the whole thing?
It could be, yeah. That would make more sense.
As an aside, the protobuf team is now interested in registering a MIME type for protobuf, which I think is going to be application/x-protobuf. So we'll need to work out what to do with our format that expects it to be application/protobuf. But that's sort of slightly aside. MIME types are hard.
I actually like this, so I'm in favor of registering this. Mostly because like it'd just be nice to have it one standardized or like registered, and if the SDKs are already sending that, I'm pretty sure you guys are, but then that just makes it just a place to look at it. Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to assume we want to ponder this one longer and then nag Clemens about making it happen. Okay, cool.
If Clements doesn't want to get action items, he should show up to the meeting.
It's
Simple as that.
it's actually, I should just assign it to him. Not that he'll pay attention to me assigning it to him, but yes. All right, cool. Next week, I'll find the next batch of stuff to look at. All right, with that, we're at almost at the top of the hour anyway. Any other topics we want to bring up? All right, cool. Thank you all for joining. Have a good rest of your weekend, and we'll talk next time.
Awesome.
Bye.
Thank you,
Bye,
everyone.
Reddy.